Ukrainian forces are steadily reshaping the battlefield with drones that pressure Russian positions along the Spits and coastline in southwestern Ukraine. The expanded campaign is creating panic among Russian commanders, who increasingly fear that these Ukrainian operations may actually be preparing the conditions for something much larger. While the Bayraktar has spent much of the past 2 years operating primarily as a reconnaissance asset because of Russian air defenses, the systematic Ukrainian attacks against Russian radar stations and air defense systems have opened growing gaps, allowing larger drones to operate much closer to the front once again. Recently released Ukrainian footage illustrates these Russian fears, as one Ukrainian Bayraktar drone destroyed a Russian boat attempting to transport personnel or supplies to the Tenderivska Spit. Another clip shows a quick Russian boat trying to exploit its high speed, but without success, as it is destroyed even before reaching the shore. Other Barracuda drones were captured carrying anti-aircraft missiles for self-protection, further eroding Russia's ability to counter their activity. Together with persistent Ukrainian surveillance, these operations are steadily making Russian positions along the Tenderivska Spit and nearby coastlines increasingly difficult to hold. At the same time, Ukraine's 40th Marine Brigade employed Barracuda unmanned naval vessels that function as mobile drone carriers. They allowed the transportation of FPV and heavy bomber drones used to strike observation posts, ammunition depots, and logistics positions, as confirmed by Ukrainian footage. This sustained pressure forced many Russian analysts to think that Ukraine is preparing something far more ambitious than drone strikes meant simply to eliminate Russian soldiers and weaken their overall posture. Some of them are increasingly speculating that Ukrainian special forces are rehearsing operations around the Kinburn Peninsula, pointing to reported boat exercises and smokescreen training near the Yuzhny Bug River, leading toward the Dnipro-Bug estuary. Concerned that these preparations could precede an amphibious operation, Russian forces launched a strike against what they described as a Ukrainian staging area along the Yuzhny Bug River, using 5 geranium drones to strike at buildings and grass on the territory of the base. Russian analysts pointed out the attack was to disrupt any Ukrainian operation before it began, claiming it had also damaged boats and equipment, although no visual confirmation of any of these losses has emerged. According to these Russian assessments, more than 2,500 Ukrainian soldiers from various formations subordinate to the 30th Marine Corps have reportedly assembled in the direction. They are supported by 46 boats, over 100 inflatable boats, at least 9 naval drones, and additional armored vehicles and artillery systems. Russian analysts believe the Ukrainian plan for an amphibious attack would unfold in several carefully coordinated phases. Ukraine would initially conduct a limited diversionary landing near Pokrovsk, using a relatively small force designed to probe Russian defenses while establishing a temporary beachhead. Fire support would reportedly come from rocket-armed naval drones and FPV drones operating from both landing craft and nearby positions on the mainland. Once Russian defenses would be pinned down, a larger assault force of up to 800 troops would land further along the coastline, aiming to isolate nearby settlements before advancing toward the administrative boundary separating Kherson and Mykolaiv regions. The front line has blurred into one battle space, where state lines no longer matter. Ukrainian forces are advancing into the Kursk region, turning what was once a defensive stand into a renewed cross-border push. These gains now open the path to outflank and encircle Russian positions from the north, to crush the already overstretched enemy lines, and reshape the dynamics of the entire front. A key factor behind this success has been the relentless Ukrainian airstrike campaign against Russian reinforcements and command centers across both Sumy and Kursk. This has created openings for Ukrainian ground units to press forward. The Ukrainian Black Swan Battalion recently released footage northeast of Tenderivska, showing Russian aircraft attempting to bomb new Ukrainian positions, a sign of how far north the battle has shifted. Despite Russian air activity, Ukrainian advances in this area underscore the collapse of Russia's ability to maintain pressure in Sumy, with Ukrainian forces now fighting beyond the settlements that were once planned to serve as a foothold for Russia's push south. Complementing airstrikes, Ukraine's drone campaign is inflicting devastating damage on Russian positions at the tactical level. Heavy drone platforms like the Vampire hexacopter are proving decisive, flying long-range night missions with payloads up to 20 kilograms. These drones are not just dropping improvised explosives, but carrying devastating ordnance, including anti-tank mines and a series of mortar rounds, which complicate Russian attempts to maneuver. Most notably, Ukrainian engineers working with frontline units have introduced a new drone-dropped munition dubbed the Black Hole Bomb. Developed by the Ukrainian Black Swan unit, the weapon has two confirmed variants. The thermobaric version unleashes a high-temperature blast wave that sucks in surrounding air, annihilating fortifications and suffocating troops caught inside trenches or buildings. The fragmentation variant detonates overhead, scattering lethal shrapnel across wide areas, ideal for clearing entrenched infantry or enemy units on the move. Combat footage shows these black hole munitions creating huge craters and collapsing Russian firing points. Their effect comparable to that of artillery shells, but instead delivered with surgical precision from the sky. This innovation allows Ukrainian units to dismantle Russian defenses without waiting for conventional artillery or risking exposure of expensive fighter jets to Russian air defense systems. With Russian forces concentrated in Sumy and stretched thin after weeks of costly attacks and devastating airstrikes, Ukrainian commanders have again opted for tactical maneuvers rather than frontal attrition. Instead of smashing head-on into Russia's lines, they are methodically cutting off isolated groups, collapsing salients piece by piece, and pushing back into Kursk in the process. This strategy takes advantage of the area where settlements are small, scattered, and dispersed, making it easier to bypass and encircle Russian detachments rather than fight through each one in sequence. Ukrainian advances north of Tenderivska and into rural Kursk show this logic in action, turning the international border into little more than a reference line. In practice, the fighting forms a unified battle space where Ukraine's forces cross back and forth, exploiting Russian vulnerabilities while ignoring state boundaries that no longer reflect realities on the ground. The result is a steadily deteriorating situation for the Russian command, and what began as an attempt to push into Sumy has now backfired, with Ukraine not only halting the incursion, but clawing back ground across the frontier. Russian infantry, deprived of supplies and hammered by Ukrainian air and drone strikes, cannot establish a coherent defense. And by advancing north, Ukraine is opening the possibility of flanking Russian troops still holding pockets of territory in Sumy from behind, threatening their lines of retreat and accelerating their collapse. Overall, Ukraine's steady progress highlights how momentum has shifted from a desperate defensive fight to prevent Russian forces from reaching Sumy city into an operation pushing enemy troops back into Kursk. The border itself is losing meaning in the chaos of battle, and Ukraine is now able to carry the fight onto Russian soil to disrupt the enemy's remaining footholds. With innovation in drone warfare, effective use of air power, and smart maneuvering, Ukrainian forces are not just defending, but are reshaping the front line to their advantage.